Welcome back. Got another FNAF theory reaction video on tap for today. In this video, as you can see by the title and the first frame of this video, we are talking about the character Henry Emily. One of maybe the second most important character of the entire series. At worst, third most important character. You have William Afton number 1, Michael Afton 2, Henry's probably number 3. And yet, despite how important he is, and despite of how he's been there since the very beginning, being William Afton's business partner, we know absolutely nothing about him. He hasn't appeared in a game yet. We have guesses and assumptions that he's appeared, and he's definitely been referenced in games before, but himself, he has not made an appearance yet, which is very, very disappointing for a character, despite him being so important, has not shown up yet. But you know my opinions on Henry. I personally think it's annoying, and I do not like it, of how Henry's backstory and Edwin's backstory are the exact same. How they both are grieving because they had a child who died at a young age. Henry obviously had Charlotte, and Edwin had David. Both their children died at like 3-4 years old. And then being grieving fathers, going through the grieving process, they make robot versions of their dead kid, and that turns their robot dead kid goes on to be a villain, a killer. In Henry's case, it was the Charlie bot later becoming one of the fourth closet animatronics that would later become Circus Baby, because that's the thing that happens in the books. And then obviously in David's case, the robot that becomes a killer is the Mimic. And well, the Mimic is kind of slightly important as of recently. So that makes things in the FNAF timeline, lore, continuity, talking about the whole series as a whole, that makes it very easy of how your fathers, kids died at a young age, going through the grieving process, builds them in robot likeness, and they go on to kill people. That doesn't make it any less confusing. Like, why do you just give them a different backstory? That feels so obvious, feels so easy, but what are you gonna do?
Henry Emily is another entry into the long list of absolutely indispensable characters of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline that we have barely any information about. But instead of a victim, Henry is the co-owner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And again, he's barely referenced in the entirety of the games. Yeah, we're gonna be scrounging at the bottom of the barrel for evidence today, but it's Five Nights at Freddy's, so I'm sure you're used to it. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So we'll start with the game lore about Henry Emily, which is admittedly incredibly sparse. The first confirmed reference to Henry Emily is in Secret of the Mimic, the most recent video game. And technically that's just to Hen. We're 99% certain about another time Henry shows up in the timeline, but that is not directly confirmed. So for now, all we have is Secret of the Mimic in this audio log addressed to Henry.
Test. Journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much...
It's just bizarre that he calls him Hen, because obviously Hen being, well, Henry, Edwin and Henry not only know each other, but being on nickname basis tells you that they're very close, very personal. And from everything we know of how Edwin was treated, of how William Afton was poaching all of employees from Edwin's costume manor, which caused him to be vengeful and not trust Fazbear Entertainment anymore. It's kind of crazy that, his friend Henry sides with the business partner, the man who poached Edwin's company. It's very bizarre.
Much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
That's it. This is, again, literally, and by no stretch of the imagination, unless I'm forgetting something, the only time in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise that Henry Emily is directly addressed in the games. You're kidding me. So how do we know what Henry is then? Well, there are other times in the franchise he's referenced, but we need information about him to know when he's being referenced. So where do we get that information? Well, we have to get a little creative with some of the less confirmed or less directly adjacent pieces of media from Five Nights at Freddy's, mainly the books. So
Let's get creative!
the books are actually where we start learning more about Henry Emily, because he's like an actual character in them. Well,
The books are vital. Same goes for every character in this series. Like, before William Afton was named in Sister Location, how we knew William Afton is a name that exists in the entire series. And once again, William Afton is arguably the most important character in the entire series. We didn't get the William Afton name from the games, from Sister Location. We got him from the books, the original trilogy of books. Specifically, the first book, The Silver Eyes. That was when we first got William Afton being named. William Afton being the purple guy. So, the books, quite literally, have told us every character in this series. William Afton, we got him from the books. Henry, we got him from the books. Edwin, originally, was a book character. David was also a book character. Oswald was also a book character.
well, he's
Susie, the person who possesses Chica, is also from the books. Cassidy is also from the books.
exists in backstories. Damn, even in the best of times, he's a background character. The main character of the novel trilogy is Charlotte Emily, who, over the course of the 3 books, we learn is actually a robot. See, in the separate continuity for the FNAF novels, Henry Emily and William Afton were business partners that opened up Fredbear's Family Diner together, and then later Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Henry was an excellent inventor, and it was his genius that allowed for the creation of these animatronics and the Springlock suits. In that continuity, however, William Afton kills his daughter, Charlotte Emily.
Another thing point before we move on. It is widely believed that William Afton and Henry originated with 2 different businesses. And one went bankrupt and the other person bought out and saved the company. Whether that was Henry's genius, Henry's skilled animatronic design, that was a successful business, and then bought out William Afton's failing business because he was going bankrupt, and that caused William Afton to be vengeful and lash out and kill Henry's daughter Charlotte because, oh, you saved my business and now I'm going to take it out on you by killing your child. To give a motive. Because as Steel Wool said in interviews, every great horror villain has a backstory. They're not just evil for the sake of it. There's other wrongdoings that happen in their life that cause them to lash out and be a killer. Like Freddy Krueger is a revenge story. Jason Voorhees is a revenge story. That kind of thing. Or vice versa, William Afton was a successful business, and Henry, despite his genius animatronic design, was not able to make a profit, so his business was going bankrupt, and then getting bought out by William Afton. And in turn, since William Afton was the head guy, the one with the successful business, Henry was kind of like a contractor for William Afton. That's how Henry made animatronics for William. Whatever interpretation there is, it's widely assumed that one of those could be what happened with the backstory. Also, I brought it up time and time again, but since I'm calling this out, that is also that happened in real life. as we know, FNAF is very, very loosely inspired by, you may have heard of this. It's a little-known franchise called Chuck E. Cheese. Just pizzeria, animatronic characters, arcades. Just FNAF was its own original idea, right? Well, the lore of Chuck E. Cheese in, I want to say the 80s, I think it was the 80s, was Chuck E. Cheese, if I'm not mistaken, it was just like FNAF. They were two separate companies that merged together because one was about to go bankrupt, and then the merged companies turned into Chuck E. Cheese as we know. Another reason why the companies merged together is how you get someone like Chica, who was a maker of Melody, maybe, was part of Edwin's costume manor in Seek of the Mimic, to later be part of the obvious core four of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, Chica. Same goes for Foxy, who was a pirate. Kind of a little bit off, doesn't really fit in with everyone else, right? But if it comes out that Foxy was another, independent, animatronic, independent entertainment, but the business went under and merged together with Fazbear Entertainment, that's how he got part of it.
And his grief sends him into a manic spiral, to the point where instead of going to therapy and processing this, he creates a robotic replica of Charlotte Emily, and programs her to act like Charlotte never died. He then begins to make 3 more copies of different ages so she can grow up throughout the time, and uses this weird hallucinogenic technology to make her seem lifelike. He has lost his mind. Remember, keep in mind, and I'm never gonna get over this, his son's alive. In the book, he has 2 kids, and the son survived. His sister reminds him hey, you have a living son and wife still. Pay attention to them. And he is so locked in that not only does he focus all of his time on recreating his daughter, he programs her to think her brother died so her memories make sense. Her living brother. I can't get into it right now. Now, it's a wild story. And
it's kind of like William Afton, of how after the FNAF 4 Cronchild died, William Afton locked himself down in the sister location bunker under the FNAF 4 house. Him being locked away, that caused Mrs. Afton to either die or divorce William Afton, and that caused him to build an animatronic in the likeness of his wife, Mrs. Afton, that being Ballora. That's why Ballora's eyes are shut, because she was blind. She was not seeing the vision of what William Afton was going through in his grief. Same goes for why in the FNAF 4 minigames, the older brother was watching the FNAF 4 Cronchild and bullying him, be able to do whatever he wants because, there is no adult. And when there's no adult, you obviously have to default to the oldest sibling being the one in charge.
And to be clear, it's different from the games.
As an oldest sibling, I can tell you that's how it goes, from personal experience. Not that I bully my younger siblings, but I'm just saying, as the oldest, when the adult is not there, the oldest is the one in charge. Got all that?
Several things in the FNAF novel trilogy that do not line up with the game timeline that makes it a necessity that these are 2 separate stories. William dies way later in the timeline in a very different way. He seemingly only has Elizabeth as a daughter and no sons, etc., etc. But the thing is, even though these are 2 separate stories, they are related. They're echoes of each other. They may not be the same song, but they rhyme. After all, the same goes for the movies. That's a completely separate story. But William and Henry are still co-owners of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They still work together to make that happen. William Afton is still the guy who kills people. There are echoes in these stories. So if we're to assume that in the games, a man named Henry Emily co-owned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza with William Afton, does that help us find any lore from the games and attach it to the game version of Henry? Well, it does, the one that most people know him for. Now we can talk about FNAF 6, or Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator. Which, by the way, it's still insane to me that the first piece of even speculative evidence that Henry Emily exists at all as a character is in the last main series game that Scott created. Huh? Anyway, throughout FNAF 6,
I mean, Scott did make Ultimate Custom Night. So technically that was the last game. Not FNAF 6.
it's clear that we're working for somebody. The man who set up all of this. He's the same man who leaves us the cassette tapes we use during the salvage minigames and whose monologues we hear at the end of the games. But those two monologues are the key times that we get any information about him. The first one plays if you've salvaged every animatronic and survived all the way to the end, where you get the FNAF monologue, like the thing people know, one of the best moments in the entire franchise, the one that goes,
"Connection terminated."
In this monologue,
I have listened to that 2-minute Henry dialogue so much. I feel like at this point I've memorized the speech because it is just that iconic and it's that engraved in my memory. And despite me listening to that 2-minute dialogue 1,000 times, I still get chills to this day. It's that good.
the voice tells us that he knows pretty much everything you could about what's happened at the Fazbear franchises. He knows Elizabeth by name and addresses Circus Baby as Elizabeth. So not only does he know her, but he knows that she's possessing Circus Baby. He calls William an old friend, sarcastically but still, and he claims that his daughter was killed by William Afton and possesses the marionette. So whoever this voice is incredibly entrenched into this series.
Except the kills his daughter part, that there's a little bit of a nitpick here because he says, "A wound first inflicted on me that I let spread to others." Obviously, a wound first inflicted on me being his daughter, Charlotte, being killed in the back alleyway behind the pizzeria after being locked out. But then you have Susie in Ultimate Custom Night saying, I was the first, I'm the one who's seen everything. So, who's telling the truth here? Who was actually first in the death order? Right? So there you go.
To the point that he also knows Michael Afton. After all, he says that this job listing was not intended for the player character, who is likely Michael Afton, but says that even though a way out was planned for them, he has a feeling that's not what he wants and this is right where he wants to be, implying that he knows it's a similarly mournful, regretful person involved in this whole mess. And all of that already has connections to Henry Emily. But there's one more damning monologue if you go for the insanity ending, where you get Henry's inner thoughts in the lead up to creating FNAF 6. Not only are there way more regrets through it, but he mentions that the MCI victims are, quote, little souls trapped in prisons of my making. Well, we know that the MCI victims are possessing the original Freddy Fazbear animatronics. So if that's where they're trapped, this quote is saying that whoever this voice is the one who created the Freddy
Wait. Play that again? Hold up.
quote, little souls trapped in prisons of my making.
That's true. Hold on.
Well, we know that the MCI victims are possessing the original Freddy Fazbear animatronics. So if that's where they're...
Yes, and it goes a step further than that to even more absurdity because, once again, FNAF wasn't already as complicated as it is. So, these small souls trapped in prisons of my own making. The small souls being the 5 kids being lured to a back room and killed by William Afton in the Golden Spring Bonnie suit. The missing children's incident, where 5 kids are to a back room, killed, stuffed in the suits, never be seen again, held missing. And that's where you get the names of Gabriel being Freddy, Fritz being Fotsy, yeah, Jeremy being Bonnie, and Susie being Chica, Cassidy being Golden Freddy, and Charlotte being the puppet, Sitz. But those dead souls from the original Core 4, just to take a step further and make it make sense somehow, is the remnant soul energy, soul juice, whatever you want to call it, from the original Core 4 animatronics from FNAF 1 was syringe extracted from the original Core 4 animatronics into the Funtime animatronics. So, Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, maybe the Bonnie Ham puppet, but that is still up to interpretation. And then, even a step further, if that was not already complicated enough, Molten Freddy is a split-off part of Ennard. Because to recap, the end of this location, it's all the Funtime animatronics taking a piece of them to form Ennard. Ennard, at night 5, after all the pieces of the 5 Funtime animatronics merge together, it becomes Ennard. They scoop you. Ennard wears Michael Afton's body as a skin suit, then goes outside because they say, we can't be outside as an animatronic. We need to look human. And then that causes Michael Afton's skin to decay over days because he goes from normal skin to outright purple and molten decayed because, well, humans don't really have animatronic pieces inside of them, right? And then it becomes too much. He becomes way too purple, way too decayed, where it arouses suspicion. And then that's when Ennard jumps out into the sewer to hide and find another skin suit to wear as a mask so they can find the surface again, right? But in between that endings in Sister Location to FNAF 6, there is a point where Circus Baby is ejected from the Ennard conglomeration. The only reason why you know this is because on the FNAF World and Scott Games, the 2 websites that's tied to FNAF and tied to Scott Cawthon, where we have got a ton of lore Easter eggs before. If you look at the source code for those 2 websites, Baby is outright ejected from the Ennard conglomeration. And that's how Baby goes from normal Circus Baby to, Scrap Baby, where they have like a lobster claw, they have rollerblades. Now, why I say all that, and given the backstory of Sister Location, the Core 4, the Remnant, Soul Juice, and Baby being ejected from the tribe, and how we know about that is from FNAF World and Scott Games source codes websites, is because Baby becomes Scrap Baby. Molten Freddy is the remnant, the remains of Ennard. Molten Freddy is practically Ennard, but without Baby there. So Molten Freddy has the Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and once again, maybe not, Bonnie hand puppet inside those Molten Freddy. Right? Recap, connected to the soul energy remnant from the original Core 4 kids that was killed in the back room in the missing children's incident is now tied to Molten Freddy.
Trapped, this quote is saying that whoever this voice is the one who created the Freddy animatronics. Altogether, this game is telling us that FNAF 6, the Pizzeria Simulator, was created by a man who knows everything about Fazbear's, knows William Afton, knows about Elizabeth and Michael Afton, his daughter was killed by William Afton, and he made the animatronics for the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. That's just gotta be Henry Emily. And from there, we now know that Charlotte is the one who possesses the marionette in the games. So that's a lot of information about him. We basically learned that much of his backstory is the same, even if the plot of these games are different than the books. But is there any other reference to Henry throughout the series? Well, not really. A lot of people say that this desk man from FNAF World might be Henry Emily with the way he talks, but frankly, I think he's more likely a self-insert of Scott Cawthon than anything else, especially since Circus Baby kills him, which doesn't line up with the timeline at all. Technically speaking, there really isn't another mention of...
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the reason why we believe that was Henry is because in the books, doesn't Henry die from one of his animatronic creations? Right? I believe that's something that happens in the books. So when you see an 8-bit minigame of someone who created an animatronic and then kills them, your brain is automatically going to make the connection, oh, that must be Henry.
Of Henry throughout the entire games, but I do think we have reason to believe that there is speculative evidence of Henry somewhere else in this franchise, which is once again in Secret of the Mimic. An undercurrent of the story of Secret of the Mimic is that William Afton was slowly corroding MCM from the inside to topple it and buy it for himself. He was messing with contracts, extending things to waste time and money, and one of the biggest parts of this plan was to poach employees, approaching these unhappy MCM workers and saying, hey, here's a better job for a similar thing you're already doing for more pay. Come work for me instead. Slowly and steadily eating the business right out from Edwin's nose. But to do this, he would have needed help from somebody on the inside. In one of the admin offices, we find this email. We are almost there. I need the rest of the Murray staff contact info. The sooner the better. You get that for me and I can sweeten the deal. How would you like to manage one of the new franchise locations? WA. In other words, William Afton had the contact of somebody in the administration wing who was able to get him the contact information of all the other employees at Murray's Costume Manor. But if you look at the administration wing, there's really just 3 offices. There's Edwin's, the big one up the stairs that's very obviously Edwin. There's one filled with Chica merchandise and different design documents, which seem like it's more likely to be Fiona's office.
Since we know Fiona is the one who designed Chica, which is bizarre, but we move.
And then there's a third office filled with technology. I have a personal theory that there were 3 administrators at Murray's Costume Manor: Edwin and Fiona Murray and Henry Emily. After all, for the longest time, a lot of people had been speculating that Henry originally had his own business and joined together with William, bringing over Chica and a few other characters to form Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And this lines up with that theory perfectly, but now with evidence. This game takes place in 1979. This company takeover took place at least 5 months ago, but likely over a year ago. So Henry could have originally been with Murray's Costume Manor before ever joining on to Fazbear's, to which then William offers him a much better position, one where he could even manage that new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We already know that Murray's Costume Manor was being commissioned to create Freddy Fazbear's Pizza animatronics, and if this theory is true, Henry is still the creator of those animatronics, just not under William Afton yet. Then he would have jumped ship when he saw the writing on the wall of MCM. After all, he's got a daughter to take care of. He needs a stable job. It is literally the night before this video goes up, and I just thought of something. I checked and verified it, and I just need to put this in, so walk with me. In the showroom
All right, let's go.
lobby, there are these portraits, one of Edwin, one of Fiona. There's a blank space in the middle. Now, there's a lot of speculation what that is, but this lines up really well with the idea of Henry being the 3rd executive, because this wouldn't have been his father. His father died before these portraits would have been necessary. This wouldn't be David, because this is a business showroom and they all have placards. Why would David need a placard? He's a child. This space was the 3rd executive. This space was Henry Emily. That's why we don't get to see it. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. Anyway, with all this evidence,
I do like it. So far, I'm on board, and so far, you've convinced me. I like it. Because it makes sense of why Edwin and Henry would not only know each other, but be on like a nickname basis. But like, if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe Edwin ever says William or William Afton. I don't think he ever calls him out by name. He says stuff like Fazbear and Fazbear Entertainment, and he says like, you know, Edwin's father says like, oh, don't trust Fazbear Entertainment. But I don't think he ever said anything specifically about William. But he called out Henry by name. So this makes sense. So I'm on board with it.
Evidence in mind, what does the story of Henry Emily look like in Five Nights at Freddy's? Henry was an incredible engineer, and one of the most valuable assets that Murray's Costume Manor had, able to make many of Edwin's animatronics come to life, and William Afton knew that. In the plans to expand Fredbear's Family Diner into the Freddy Fazbear franchise, he'd need that help. He would need that expertise, and while he's at it, he would need more assets in general. So William began dragging out the contract he had with MCM, wasting the time and money of an already fragile and suffering company, making it as shaky and unsteady as possible. And right when it's getting worse than it's ever been, William Afton reaches out to Henry Emily directly. After all, if Edwin, quote, gets the change orders from Hen, then it seems like the workflow was that as an administrator, Henry Emily would directly receive the design requests from William Afton and Fazbear's Pizza, and then forward them to Edwin for approval once he looked them over, which would mean William Afton had direct access and communication to Henry Emily, someone who would have been high up enough to have all the contact information for the rest of the staff, willing to give it to William in exchange for a solid position at Fazbear's Pizza and a managerial role at their new location. In other words, in order to save himself and make sure he had money to protect his kid, he co-founded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza with William Afton. After enough time, MCM fully collapses, and when the dust settles in 1983, William and Henry open up Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But then, sometime after, either due to jealousy of Henry's family and talents, or the blame of the death of the crying child, William Afton kills Charlotte Emily outside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which sends Henry into a grief spiral. And he's out of the narrative for the majority of the timeline after this. It's speculated what he's doing during this time. Some people think he's framed for the MCI and is in prison. Others think the grief is too much and he's just in a depressive, isolated state until he comes back. But whatever that moment of time was, eventually he learns that whatever's going on at Fazbear's is still happening.
I do believe it's the latter of him just being in a depressive state, because now take this with a grain of salt, because obviously you're dealing with game canon, book canon, and now movie canon. But how Henry is presented in the movie in FNAF 2, you can see he's just broken and his soul is crushed after Charlotte dies. And I feel like that is the interpretation that we are meant to go with, not the prison one. Because, if I'm not mistaken, the most we have as far as prison jail time is on the newspapers in FNAF 1 of how a suspect was caught on camera after killing kids and lured to a back room and being convicted. Obviously, a suspect being William Afton, but if I'm not mistaken, even though he was convicted, was a thing where like the bodies could never be found. Like he was caught on camera doing something, but the bodies were never recovered, so William Afton was able to walk away freely. And that's why he's never been in jail. That's why he's been able to open up location after location after location after location with no consequences. And everyone just casually forgets the spooky ghost stories of a man in a yellow rabbit suit killing kids.
And needs to be stopped. And he knows someone like him is the only one that can do it. Someone with the knowledge of the franchise and knowledge of animatronics enough to fully stop this. So he begins the Pizzeria Simulator plan, a trap to lure every single related person into one place, gather them all, lock them in, and incinerate them so there's nothing left behind. And with all the material still attached to their souls gone, hopefully, those souls can finally find rest, including himself, as he states,
I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound.
And as far as we're aware, that's where his story ends. Some people think he goes on to become Old Man Consequences, but I think that's less likely than another person we've yet to make a video like this about. But it's still speculation at the end of the day. Let me know what you think. Do you like this idea and concept?
I like it. I think it does add a lot of fill in the blanks as far as Henry's character. Things are still consistent, right? Henry being a backup business partner to William Afton, founding Fazbear Entertainment. Henry realizing that, hey, my business partner is, loves child pizza parties a little bit too much. And Mer's kid, so maybe I want to distance myself and banish him to the deepest dark pit of hell, right? And it also does add context of, like I said earlier, of why Edwin never mentions William Afton, especially by name, but not only mentions Henry, but mentions him on a nickname basis, them being close enough. So Henry being tied to the costume manor and being the top executive also makes sense. Now, I would say you get a little bit of a question mark, you get a little gray area, is you have Fiona, who, I don't know if she made it, but at the very minimum, designed Chica in Chica the Mimic. She designed it. Was the other Springlock suits like Bub the Dog, Fredbear, the Monty Gator Springlock, the Pirate Captain, like those? Were those designed by Henry then? And then you have someone like the Fiona Mitzvah Machine. That was designed by Edwin because it was locking Fiona's consciousness in the machine. And that's how we get M1. So each of those three characters, they played a part and they created something in the costume manor. Maybe, I don't know, that's just how my brain is interpreting this idea at this moment. I think I have to ponder it and think about it a little bit more. But yeah, what do you think about it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And are you someone like me? I'm very curious. Are you someone like me where you are disappointed and annoyed that despite of how important Henry is, he still has never outright appeared in a game? Like, we got Hen in Chica the Mimic. We got HRY 223 in FNAF 6. And we assume that to be Henry. But that's always been assumptions. He's one of the most important characters in the series. Name drop him fully. Give him a speaking line where it says Henry ellipsis dot. I don't know. Have him say something. Outright name him. Have him appear in face to face in a game. I don't know, something. Just hope it's not a pipe dream. And maybe we are able to fill in that blank for the FNAF game that is maybe coming out this year. Let's see.